This is my Quipu. It has 7 sections, and the first section has to do with how we learn better in a safe environment. This bead stands for the cortex, which is the exterior part of the brain. This is where memories and information are stored, and its large size reminds us of how much can be stored in the cortex. This bead, the red one, stands for the limbic system, which shows us the importance emotions are in remembering situations and information. So I picked a red bead because it just stood out, so it reminded me that it was important. The gold bead stands for attention and novelty, and the brain seeks novelty, which is changes in the environment. I chose a gold bead because it really stood out and was unique, and I identify uniqueness with change. This section has to do with the information processing model. It's they're all the same bead, but they're in rainbow order, so the pattern helps me remember each step individually. The first section has to do with the environment, and that has to do with our senses, which are see, smell, taste, touch, and hear. With these senses, we can pick up stimuli in our environment, and it's either disposed of quickly or it continues on to the immediate memory, and this is where information is briefly stored until it's figured out how it's disposed of, and then it continues on to the working memory, which is the yellow bead, and this is where the information from immediate memory comes, or you can retrieve information from long-term storage, which is the green bead, and that's where sense and meaning is made of that information and those memories. And then self-concept is how we view ourselves in the world, and the emotional tie that we make with those past experiences. Then this section has to do with retention and learning. The first bead is retention and recall, and during prime time 1, when we learn new information, in downtime we practice this information, and in prime time 2, which is closure, we make sense and meaning of the information. The small bead has to do with the emotional connection, and once we make an emotional connection with information or a memory, we're able to better remember it for the future. Then this bead has to do with rehearsal, which is the repetition and processing of information, and it has to do with 2 factors, which is the amount of time devoted to rehearsing that information or that memory, or it has to do with the types of rehearsal, which are either rote rehearsal or elaborative rehearsal. This section has to do with the power of transfer. These 2 beads, this one is transfer during learning, this one's transfer of learning, and I picked the same bead but different colors because they both are similar, but they do have their differences, and I picked the same with these 2, which is positive transfer and negative transfer. Transfer during learning is the effect that past learning has on the acquisition of new learning, and transfer of learning has to do with how new learning is applied to future situations. Positive transfer has to do with past learning helping the understanding of new learning, and negative transfer has to do with the interference of past learning on the understanding of new learning. The L and R beads have to do with the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, and their different functions, but how they still relate to one another. The left side of the brain has to do with logic, and some things that go on here are analysis, time sensitivity, context of language, recognition of letters, numbers, words, the sequence of events, and understanding external messages. And then the right side of the brain has to do with creativity, and some aspects of this are patterns, like understanding the concept of space, the recognition of faces, places, and objects, being able to do math operations and relation operations, and internalizing messages. Then these 3 beads have to do with information and memory of the arts. I picked red, yellow, and blue beads because they're the primary colors, and they remind me of like art and that kind of stuff. The red bead has to do with music, and music, the tempo of it, and the rhythm. It alters your breathing, your heartbeat, your blood pressure, and your muscle activity, and which has an effect on like how you learn. And then the yellow bead has to do with visual images or the visual arts. So this has advanced and sophisticated our cultures, and through our brain is able to make representations of images, either of fantasy or real life activities. And the blue bead has to do with movement. Physical movement and learning coincide with one another. When you use movement, it increases your blood transport, which carries oxygen, which the brain uses as fuel. And the last section, this bead has to do with foundations of learning. This has to do with practicing with information, and this bead has to do with respect and meaning of the working memory. The foundations are like the basics of learning. So when you learn the basics, you can use that for future events. The practice, which is the white bead, I chose this because when I had tennis, I would practice. I'd practice with white shoes, and this is the repetition of a certain event that when you get good enough at it, you can attain a higher level. And then the last bead has to do with meaning and respect of the working memory. So when you learn new information, your working memory, it oh, hold on. When you learn new information, you eventually attain sense and meaning of that new information.